All thoughts and opinions expressed on WRHU's Queerly Informed do not reflect the views of Hofstra University, the Board of Trustees, or Radio Hofstra University. All contrasting thoughts or suggestions can be sent to programming@wrhu.org or to room 127 Herbert Hall, 111 Hofstra University, Hempstead, New York, 11549.
Welcome to the 8th installation of Season 3 of Queerly Informed.
I'm Minta Sloan.
And I'm Summer Savaria.
And we'll have all the latest in international, national, and local LGBTQ news.
A private chat of young Republicans is leaked, revealing racist, anti-Semitic, and homophobic conversations.
Democratic mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani gives an LGBTQ+ history lesson in a new campaign advertisement.
A librarian fired for defending LGBTQ+ books will see a $700,000 settlement.
And more.
In queer entertainment, I'm Bryana Neff with more on a new Sydney nightclub, Renee Rapp and Chaperone statements about ICE, and YouTubers Dan and Phil.
For gay history, I'm Camryn Bowden with more on LGBTQ+ Spirit Day. Stay tuned to find out more.
For your Queerly Informed Health Report, I'm Xia Tuttle with more on new reporting that a new Ohio budget could force genital surgeries on intersex babies.
Thank you for joining us today. Let's get into the headlines. Leaders of the Young Republicans' private group chat was leaked and revealed excessive use of homophobic, racist, and ableist slurs. The text exchange, titled Restore YR War Room, is part of a large group of Telegram chats which were obtained by the media company Politico. Young Republican leaders from New York, Kansas, Arizona, and Vermont used various slurs at least 251 times between January and August of 2025, according to Politico. Participants directed their slurs at rivals and other members of the group, and referred to Black, Chinese, Mexican, and Italian people with hate speech and used concerning pro-Hitler rhetoric. Vice Chair of the Kansas Young Republicans chapter, William Hendricks, lost his job in Attorney General Chris Kobat's office last week ahead of the leak's publication. Many members of the group chat are also being investigated and may lose their jobs. However, Vice President J.D. Vance defended the group chat, claiming that, quote, kids do stupid things, especially young boys. Many found this hypocritical, as Vance called for people who joked about the assassination of Charlie Kirk on their social media or in private group chats to lose their jobs. New York Rep. Yvette Clarke, chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, responded to the situation via X. Quote, the future of the Republican Party proudly embraces bigotry that belongs in the past, and every American needs to recognize how dangerous that is.
I mean, New York Rep. Yvette Clarke talking about this, the future of the Republican Party proudly embraces bigotry. I mean, that can't be understated. This is proudly getting talked about, proudly getting represented. These people don't shy away from this. These people embrace this mindset. They embrace that hatred, and it is a very dangerous thing. It's dangerous to support these people in any way. It's dangerous to support them financially, even just viewing their posts, giving them any recognition at all. It is dangerous. You're indirectly spreading their message. And I think that it kind of gets lost on us sometimes with social media of like viewing a viral thing where, yeah, we want to look at it because we want to stay informed, and it's good to stay informed, but it's important to keep in mind to not spread that information, or not spread the information, but spread that message, to make sure that the message is that these people are wrong for doing this.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right in everything you just said. And I also think it's crazy that J.D. Vance is not only defending this group chat, but also referring to the people in this group chat as young boys. Because if we actually look at the ages of the people in this group chat, the youngest one was 24, and the oldest one was 35. These are not people that I would consider like too young to know better, too young to know what they're doing. These are full adults who fully understand the meaning and like the implication behind the words they're saying, and understand the history and like deep-rooted hate behind the things that they're saying. This is not blissful ignorance. This is pure hatred.
And I think what's also kind of insane about this entire conversation that we're having is that these are people who were elected into office in some places. I mean, we're talking like state representatives, state senators. We're talking people who are, campaign advisors and political operatives within the Republican Party. And these people just saw this kind of behavior and language as normal. I mean, in a context, yeah, these are like younger Republicans. You know what I mean? A lot of the majority of the Republican Party is much older. We're talking in their, 40s, 50s, 60s. These kids are not kids, I guess, but these adults are, late 20s, early 30s. So they are technically young Republicans in terms of the layout of the party. But what's even more worrying is that these groups of people, these people in specific, are not even some of like the worst ones. You know what I mean? Like there are even younger Republicans. We're talking like 18, 19-year-olds, those that have been exposed to like far right hatred on platforms like 4chan and X and all of these different social media platforms that are radicalizing these kids and turning them into these really hate-fueled monsters. And it's really, really upsetting to see because yes, like the things that these people are saying are outlandish, are crazy, and like to any like normal, well, I would think to any normal person this would be absolutely outrageous, but these aren't even some of the worst aggressors. I mean, Nick Fuentes, who's one of the like founding members of this new far-right faction within the Republican Party, actively like denies the Holocaust on the daily on like live streams. You know what I mean? I mean, we are talking like big faces in these young this young movement in the Republican Party, and they are so far radicalized. They're so radicalized already that it's like it's unnerving because yes, this is scary, but this is only like a part of what is already happening in terms of the radicalization of young men, and that's why like good role models and good like political pundits and stuff, you know what I mean, that are live streaming and that are engaged on social media and stuff. That's why that's good because these people are so far gone, and they need somebody to kind of bring them back to what is acceptable. It's societally acceptable.
The other thing that I just wanted to bring our attention to for a second is that they used various slurs at least 251 times in like a few month period. Like that's crazy. That is a lot of slurs. And then we look at the groups of people and who they targeted, rivals and other members of their group, also referring to Black, Chinese, Mexican, and Italian people, on top of what I assume is also trans people and queer people and, disabled people. I mean, those are things that were in this story as well. 251 times, at that point, you're trying. At that point, you are just throwing those words around. That is crazy to me. 251 times is more than one per day in that period. I mean, wow.
New York City mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani created a video in honor of transgender rights activist Sylvia Rivera, affirming his promises to protect and expand services for trans New Yorkers if he is elected. In a video posted on October 12th, National Coming Out Day, Mamdani educated viewers of Sylvia Rivera's life, her time with the Stonewall Rebellion, and her role in co-founding Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, shortened to STAR, with Marsha P. Johnson. The video was shot on Christopher Street Pier, the site where Johnson's body was found in 1992. Mamdani reiterates his promises to establish NYC as a sanctuary city for LGBTQ plus people, to create a dedicated, quote, office for LGBTQIA plus affairs, and set aside millions in funding for youth housing and for gender-affirming medical care, the former of which was one of STAR's primary purposes. He said, quote, "We can't bring Sylvia back, but we can honor her memory by building a city where trans New Yorkers are cherished in a time of darkness. New York must be the light. General elections will take place on November 4th.
So I think the most important aspect about this story is that right now, based on polling, this general election, this New York mayoral race is like not even close. We're talking like a 23-point lead in polling by Zohran Mamdani. Even with margin of error, even with like inaccuracies in polling, we're still talking a 23-point. If I'm not mistaken, the last New York Times Siena College poll, 23 points ahead of Andrew Cuomo, which is the next candidate in line, or next best person that they would say would be the second most ranked person in the ranked choice voting system in New York. So we're talking, I mean, massive, massive support for Zohran Mamdani. It's really this story. It's like, it's really not even that relevant because, like, at this point, and I'm not saying this knocking on wood because, like, again, based on polling, even with inaccuracies, even with the margin of error, we are still talking 20 points ahead of the next candidate in line for the mayor's office. You know what I mean? So this campaign ad, like, yes, it's amazing because, like, of course, we have a candidate who is potentially going to be not even potentially going to be, but someone who is going to stand up for LGBTQ plus rights, stand up for the poor, stand up for POC, stand up against ICE, stand up against Donald Trump. We have a candidate who's saying that he's going to do that, but then also a candidate who's saying he's going to do that with a 23-point lead in polling weeks before the general election. I mean, the last time we've seen, there's no time in history where someone has ever lost a 23-point, like a race with a 23-point polling margin. I mean, and yes, it is a couple weeks before, so anything can happen. You know what I mean? There's plenty of time for an October surprise. There's plenty of time for like anything to happen, which could affect Mamdani. But right now, New York is looking like they want to elect Zohran Mamdani, and it's because of things like this, where he is actively standing up for LGBTQ plus rights in a time when LGBTQ plus rights are being completely decimated, completely eradicated. He's standing up for the poor. He's standing up against ICE. He's standing up for immigrants and POC people, and essentially every marginalized community sees themselves in Mamdani at this point, and that is why we have such a huge, massive lead in terms of polling. And it truly, I mean, is such a good thing to see, because you need progressive voices like this to take power, because especially when things are not looking very progressive in this country, you need someone who can kind of be that voice. And it's very visible that like New York is kind of going to be that place.
Yeah, I mean, also he's, I think, predicted 87% likely to lead. To win. That's really, really, those are some really good numbers. But also, it's really nice to see not only that he's talking about these things, but they're actually being presented in his promotions, in his in his messages that he's putting out there, that he's really planning what he's going to do to help these communities. It's really nice to see that, because it's really easy for political figures to just be like, oh, I'm going to do this, oh, I'm going to do that, like, oh, I'm just going to say I'm doing this. But he's actually making plans to do these. Like, he has plans to allocate $57 million for hospitals and medical centers to provide gender-affirming care. Like, there are things that he's actually planning and publishing and talking about in these, public places about these issues that matter a lot to me. I know they matter a lot to you. I hope they matter a lot to you listeners as well. But to see him actually taking action to kind of move forward in that direction is just very nice to see as well.
Just want to fact check myself a little bit. The margin right now of polling from Beacon Research, which the sponsor of this poll, Fox News, I'm not even playing right now. 24-point Mamdani lead in polling. And this was from the October 10th to October 14th. We are talking 3 weeks out from a general election, and a candidate has a 24-point margin. So
Terry Leslie, who had been a librarian for the Campbell County Public Library System for 27 years and had served as its executive director for 11 years, was fired in 2023 for refusing to restrict access to LGBTQ plus books in her library. Leslie had refused to begin taking LGBTQ plus books off the shelf in 2021 and had continued the library's Pride Month display. An anonymous source sent Leslie screenshots of a group chat where county commissioners Shellstad and Faber allegedly conspired to ban certain library books and fire Leslie for opposing the ban of LGBTQ plus books. After being fired, Leslie filed a federal lawsuit in April against the county, its board of commissioners, the library board, and individual members of both government boards for defamation and violations of her civil rights. The lawsuit accused them of violating her First Amendment right to free speech and of firing her in a retaliatory and discriminatory way. Now, she is set to receive a $700,000 settlement.
So I'm very happy to see this outcome, because librarians of all people should be able to provide a safe space for anyone to come into the library and educate themselves on books. And we should never have knowledge taken away from people. It's a very scary thing to see LGBT books being banned and those stories being suppressed. This kind of reminds me of something personally that happened at my high school, and I wish that story had turned out a little bit differently. My high school, when I was in sophomore year, banned pride flags and started pulling LGBT books from the shelves. And our librarian refused to take down the pride displays. He was hanging up pride flags in the library, and when the school board threatened him to take them down, he started hanging up rainbow socks and t-shirts everywhere. And he did the same thing for Holocaust Remembrance Day. When they asked him to take down quotes from the book's night, he doubled down on it and posted the quotes everywhere around the entrance of the library. And ultimately, these actions of protest led to him being forced to retire from the school. So I really wish that his story had turned out differently, but I'm really happy to see other librarians in this world getting justice and getting the recognition they deserve.
Yeah, it's exactly these kind of people who are, just standing up in the face of outside forces, you know what I mean? Trying to keep the representation up, keep the visibility up. Like, those kind of people are what we need right now, especially. And, like, that's why I was so passionate about talking about, like, the Zohran Mamdani polling, because, like, we need someone who's standing up for these kind of things. And it's like, to some extent, it's like, yes, we need politicians to do it, but also we just need everyday people. I mean, like, we need your librarian doing it. We need Terry doing this. You know what I mean? We need average, everyday allies standing by, standing aside, standing with us, standing up to the forces that are trying to push us down. Like, it's exactly those kind of people who have my heart, who have the heart of, like, millions of queer people, of queer youth, of queer adults. Like, it's just so lovely to see. And honestly, like, good for Terry. Like, honestly, like, great for her. We have a quote in here that she says she's, quote, relieved to have this outcome, and she believes it will help her community to move on. People that want to keep pushing an agenda to go against the library materials and the First Amendment, I hope they see this, and I hope it's a deterrent. Like, again, these kind of faces, these kind of voices are exactly what we need right now. Standing up in the face of undue burden from far-right and conservative actors.
Next up, we have our entertainment and history reports with Bryana Neff and Camryn Bowden.
An upcoming nightclub in Sydney, Australia named after Chapel Roan is facing backlash after announcing that it will be a space specifically for gay men. The nightclub, titled Pink Pony Club, is owned by Kevin Duvall and Michael Lewis, who took to social media in a now-deleted post to announce the launch of the venue. The post stated that the space is, quote, being created specifically for gay men who love to dance, in a safe space that is theirs to enjoy, end quote. In an interview with Gay Sydney News, Lewis also said, quote, of course girls will be welcome, but it would certainly be our desire that it is predominantly gay boys. And when I say predominantly, I'm sort of talking 90% plus, end quote. Many queer women have raised questions as to why the club would be named after a song by a queer woman, only for queer women to be excluded from the space. Queer artists Renee Rapp and Chapel Roan have spoken out against ICE and the Trump administration during their respective concerts, sparking pushback from Homeland Security. During her recent performance in the Moda Center in Portland, Oregon, Renee Rapp took a moment to address the ongoing events in the city, saying, quote, we're here at the same time as some other people who shouldn't effing be here. So let's get a couple things abundantly effing clear. F ICE, F this administration, and F Trump, end quote. Singer Chapel Roan made a similar statement against ICE during a recent Los Angeles performance, prompting a response from Homeland Security Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs Tricia McLaughlin, who told TMZ that Roan needs to, quote, get a grip. YouTube creators Dan Howell and Phil Lester have publicly confirmed their relationship for the first time ever, sharing in a recent video that they've been together for 16 years. In a 46-minute video titled Are Dan and Phil in a Relationship?, the pair broke down their 16-year timeline and addressed how ongoing speculation about their sexualities and relationship affected them over the years. Howell opened up about still being closeted while their relationship was in the beginning stages, and how online speculation made him feel, quote, completely violated, end quote. The two addressed why they chose to announce their relationship now, with Howell stating that acceptance for queer people is backsliding. He said, quote, it's more important than ever that we are like, you know what, we are gay, end quote. For your queerly informed entertainment break, I'm Bryana Neff.
This week in Queer Past, LGBTQ+ Spirit Day is celebrated. Held every third Thursday of October, LGBTQ+ Spirit Day is a day to show visibility and support for LGBTQ+ youth, primarily by wearing the color purple. The day was originally started in 2010 by Canadian teenager Brittany McMillan as a way to respond to a string of bullying-related suicides by queer youth, one of the most notable being Tyler Clementi. The original observance was promoted by GLAAD, bringing national attention to the day, with it garnering even more attention after an Arkansas School Board vice president posted incendiary homophobic remarks that eventually led to his resignation. Since the first day it was celebrated, politicians and celebrities alike have posted in support of the day and worn purple, including former President Barack Obama while he was still in office. The observance continues to this day as a way to further create visibility against bullying of gay and transgender youth. For your queerly informed history lesson, I'm Camryn Bowden.
Thank you to Bryana Neff and Camryn Bowden for those reports.
Welcome to this week's Trans News Break.
Parents of a school in Oregon assisted in staging a student walkout over one transgender student's ability to use the bathroom and locker room facilities that match the child's gender identity.
When talking about the one transgender student Layla Seal shared that it was, quote, really disrespectful that trans people are preaching women's rights and then disrespecting our privacy.
Oregon state law requires that schools offer transgender students access to gender-affirming facilities that correspond to their asserted gender identity, though this can include single-user bathrooms.
A new report that was doctored and published by, quote, anti-woke academic Eric Kaufman finds that bisexual, transgender, and queer identities are in decline among college-age students.
The decline of trans and queer identities among young Americans report, which was praised by right-wing media outlets, supposedly shows that, quote, trans and queer are going out of fashion among young people.
According to one data scientist, however, the basic data analysis in the report is so flawed that it is, quote, dead on arrival. Some of the factors including only using raw data rather than weighted data, which is better suited for a full target population representation.
The AI assistant on the platform X, formerly known as Twitter, claims that gender-affirming care for trans kids is child abuse, which follows similar claims made by the billionaire owner of X, Elon Musk.
These statements, both AI-generated and commented by Musk, were made following that report from Kaufman, which inaccurately reported a decline in bisexual, transgender, and queer identities.
Musk wrote that the, quote, awful illusion has finally been shattered, and that doctors who provided gender-affirming care are, quote, modern-day Mengels who mutilated children.
The United Kingdom has been warned that recent treatment of transgender people, specifically following the UK's Supreme Court ruling on gender and a recent change to guidance, could be in violation of the European Convention on Human Rights.
The Commissioner for Human Rights for the Council of Europe, Michael O'Flaherty, said that the new guidance, which will effectively ban transgender people from being able to use public facilities that match their gender identity, will breach human rights laws.
O'Flaherty's letter said that guidance has to avoid, quote, the unsatisfactory situation in which trans people live in an intermediate zone as not quite one gender or the other.
Former President Barack Obama recently shared advice that he has for changing people's opinions on transgender issues, something he says is shaped by, quote, old-fashioned values.
On the WTF podcast with Mark Maron, Obama expressed to lead with empathy and kindness, saying, quote, if I talked about trans issues, I wasn't talking down to people and saying, oh, you're a bigot. I'd say, you know what? It's tough being a teenager. Let's treat all kids decently.
Obama also spent a moment discussing the bullying that transgender kids have been experiencing, especially as President Trump continues to ramp up his attacks on trans youth and trans people in speeches and executive action.
So I want to talk a bit about the anti-woke academic, Eric Kaufman, because first of all, I just think that's a really funny thing to call yourself. I don't know, like that's kind of silly to me. But something he said as the results of his findings in his very flawed study were that queer people and trans people were going out of fashion with the younger generation. So especially with a lot of like rhetoric lately about how being gay or being trans is a trend or a fad, I feel like that's an incredibly harmful thing to say. Being queer or being trans, it's not a trend. It's not a fad. Like, we're here and we're not going away. It's not something that you can choose. And that's just incredibly harmful rhetoric. I find it really weird that a lot of news outlets are embracing this study, even though the data is incredibly flawed in many ways. And I think it just goes to show how much news outlets are neglecting to embrace facts at this point. And there's this concerning trend of misinformation increasing on what used to be reputable news outlets, which I find very scary.
I mean, I think that when it comes to issues like reports and, data analysis and stuff, like, there is to some extent, like, some kind of like, okay, like, I guess I can understand. But then there's also, like, points where you're like, oh, wow, like, this is crazy. You know what I mean? Like, this is completely, you're just, like, falsifying information at that point. Not necessarily falsifying it, but you're just taking everything out of context. And for the group of people, specifically, like, conservatives who always are like, put it in context, put it in context, put it in context. You know what I mean? Like, if you put this report in context, it doesn't really show any data like that actually proves that bisexual and trans people are like going out of fashion or like whatever. And then kind of on that point, the fact that like, far right pundits kind of just picked it up and ran with it. You know what I mean? Like Elon Musk and libs of TikTok and, Benny Johnson and Fox News and OAN and Newsmax. And I don't know that I like knowing all of those names and things. But like the fact that they were so like ready to pick it up and just be like, look at this proves it, this proves it, this proves it, we've been saying it this whole time. And it's like, no, it doesn't. And you're taking it out of context. And the minute that you take it out of context, like, oh, it should be fine. But anytime anyone else takes something out of context, it's, well, you're taking it out of context. You know what I mean? That's not accurate to what we actually said or what we actually did. You know what I mean? So it's just like such a double standard here. And the fact that like they took that and were just like pounding it home just is so unnerving.
I just wanted to talk for a second about, studies that have been done and the fact that they are kind of taking this and running with it, even though there are obvious reasons why, this study maybe wasn't weighted properly. It's not an accurate representation of the population. There are three things when studies are conducted, three main things that, we have to think about when we make a study to see whether it's valid or not. And one of those is, were the samples randomly selected? Were they independently selected? But also like, does this sample accurately reflect the population? And if the answer is no, then you have to transform that data in order to make it such. Another thing is it has to have normal distribution. And again, that's something that you transform the data with. But this trend of, political figures and groups using flawed data to prove a point is really common, and we talked about it a lot. So, we just talked about Kaufman, but, we've talked about there's like a ROGD study by Littman that we've talked about before, and there are many, many issues with that study. We've talked about the study by Steemsma et al. From 2013 that was called Gender Identity Development in Adolescence. And, this was a really interesting study to break down because it was absolutely terribly collected data. Something really common in a lot of these studies that people take and run with is, when they don't read the study, there'll be samples, full samples, tens of samples that just get lost. So in the beginning, they'll be there. And then at the end, they just did not follow up with this person. And they say, oh, like there's regret in being transgender, or there's, something like to that matter, where because they weren't followed up, they're now counting them as null. They're counting them as people who regretted, their transition, when really that's not accurately collected data. So that's another thing I just want to, mention here is, yeah, they are taking these things out of context, but also they're completely using data that is awful and studies that are terrible and that the scientific community looks at and is like, wow, that's actually like embarrassing.
Before we end off our show, here is Xia Tuttle with your Queerly Informed Health Report.
An Ohio budget bill intended to force transgender individuals to resign to their sex assigned at birth reveal new dangers for intersex individuals. This amended state code now enables infants to only be identified as male or female on birth certificates. With that, many have spoken out against the changes made out of fear for intersex infants, as the bill disallows intersex on the birth certificates and other forms of official documentation. Activist and doctoral student Courtney Fell expressed her worry that this will lead to, quote, increased pressure for parents to accept coercive sex correction on their children. The outcomes of this for intersex infants remains unclear, but the danger is apparent.
I mean, I think that number one, this is just like a super, super scary story. But also what I worry about is that this isn't just like a sort of acting in a vacuum. What I worry is that other states will kind of adopt this because, like, yes, the rate of like intersex, like these kind of procedures are like kind of rare in terms of like the amount of people that are born intersex. It's kind of rare the amount of times that these genital correction surgeries happen and stuff. But it's still really scary because if Ohio is kind of the first one, is it going to be this, rolling kind of boulder that just continues to pick up speed and, clumps in more states that leads to more intersex individuals not being in kind of charge of their own identity. I mean, a lot of people who are forced to get these like sex correction things never find out that they're intersex or find out that they're intersex super late in their lives. And then they have like this kind of moment of questioning, like, well, I could have been this, you know what I mean? And a lot of the times kind of what they, what their gender identity is expressed as isn't necessarily what matches up with kind of the correction, like the surgery correction that they have as a child. So it's like, maybe you do this, kind of correction for this child and then 13 years down the line, they realize, like, I'm a girl and like they could have inherently been a girl that entire time had they not had this kind of surgery done. It's just unfair because ultimately infants can't make that choice for themselves, but people down the line should be able to make that choice for themselves. But this bill is basically taking away any kind of choice. And I guess it's not the first time that we've seen the Republican Party in conservative states trying to take away the right to choose.
Intersex children are about, I think, 1.7% of the population. Of those intersex babies, though, only 1 in 2,000 right now are recommended this, reassignment procedure as of right now, which that's a very small number. What the worry is, though, is that with these sorts of pressures from state and, this country's legislature, that this number will go up. And there are a lot of issues with, having very, very young children, like infants, have this surgery, other than just the danger of having sort of an invasive procedure done, and infection rates and things like that aren't necessarily great for a baby with a weakened immune system, but also that, there's a really big issue with informed consent here. Currently, studies show that about 67% of individuals who undergo this sort of corrective procedure when they're children did not have informed consent. And that is a very, very large issue and, ethical issue that is very, very scary. So, in some cases, right, you can say, oh, well, the parent can provide consent. But then if the parents also aren't properly informed and it's out of pressure from, people, it's very scary. For your Queerly Informed Health Report, I am Xia Tuttle.
Thank you for tuning in to Queerly Informed this week, here on 88.7 FM Radio Hofstra University, Spotify, YouTube, and iTunes. Thank you to the entire Queerly Informed team for your work on this week's edition.
Join us back here next week to hear the latest in queer news, as well as commentary from our group of LGBTQ reporters.
As always, if you have any suggestions for stories or content that you would like to hear, send them our way through email at queerlyinformedwrhu@gmail.com.
Thank you again to our entertainment reporter today, Bryana Neff, and our historian, Camryn Bowden, and our health reporter, Xia Tuttle, for their work on today's show.
For Queerly Informed, I'm Summer Savaria.
And I'm Minta Sloan.
Thank you for tuning in.